morning, everyone. I want to say I'm happy to welcome you, but it's one of those situations where none of us are really happy to be here, right? We wish there were different circumstances and a different reason that we're here, but we are here to honor and remember the life of Colin and just to celebrate that life. And a way that Najia thought would be a great way to kind of start off is Colin was a man who was very proud of his heritage, and if you hadn't got a chance to look at the tables over here yet, I encourage you after we're done to take a moment and go over there and just learn more about Colin's family history and heritage and everything that's on there. It's very, very interesting, but one way she thought would be good to do that is we're going to start with listening to Scotland the Brave. So we're going to play that now. We also thought it would be fitting for Colin, a man who impacted so many and also was just a lover of the theater for sure, and especially our local theater, to give you guys opportunities to pay tribute to him. So we're going to start with a little bit of an open mic time, and Najia decided I think she wants to go first. So if you want to come on up and just share with us, and then we'll open it up. And also, welcome to you guys that are joining online. I know some of you guys sent some videos ahead of time. We'll play those kind of mixed in with people sharing from the mic. So, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you all for coming to celebrate a remarkable life of a remarkable man. I hope that Colin is looking down on us today and feeling all the love for him in this room. If I told you all the stories of how much adventure and memories that we created and packed into 12 years, I'd be here for 2 weeks talking about it. So I'm just going to tell you how we met and how much he changed me and how much I changed him in a way that made us a super strong partnership. We were two separate individuals, not alike at all, but somehow we fit together. We just fit together like a puzzle. We've never had an argument. We've known each other for 12 years, married for 10, and we have never, ever had an argument. The only time that I remember Colin getting really mad at me was when I put off going to the doctor, like for 5 days, and ended up in the hospital, and he was mad. So we made a deal that if one of us says, you should go to the doctor, you go to the doctor. When we met, Colin lived in Virgin Gorda, a tiny little island in the British Virgin Islands, population 3,000 total. And it was not a good deal for Colin because he found himself single after 25 years of marriage on this island. So you figure out of 3,000 people, half of them are women, that's 1,500. Out of the 1,500, 500 are too young, 500 are too old. Of the remaining 500, 498 of them are married or otherwise. So, yeah, Colin went online. He decided to go on online dating. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, with my youngest son at home, a 13-year-old, and my other two were at university. And I was also single after 25 years of marriage. And unlike Colin, I wanted nothing to do with men. I was never going to marry again. Never, never, ever, never, never, ever, ever, never. And, well, that didn't say. Well, what happened was my book club friends kept harassing me to get online. There was no way they were going to let me stay home with my boys and my books and my wine. That's all I wanted. So they harassed me until I finally went online. And you can, when you sign up for these things, you can have parameters as to what kind of person you want to meet. Like my friend was very tall, she didn't want to meet a short man. So for me, I didn't want anybody that lived more than 15 miles from the end of my driveway because I didn't want to do this. I did not want to do this. So I started dating and I had 7 dates with 6 guys. All of them were lawyers, except the guy I went with twice, dentist. And so one night I had another date and I was just tired of that first date thing, where you have to tell people, about your whole life story and all that crap. And so I canceled it. And the system keeps suggesting people that you should talk to. And it kept popping up on my screen saying, you should talk to this guy, but he ticks all the boxes except that one about your driveway. So I canceled the date and I thought, okay, let me just check this guy out, this profile. And I thought, oh, we'll be good pen pals. Cupid had other plans. We were not pen pals. So when you sign up for these things, you're supposed to fill out a questionnaire, and one of the questions is to talk about the last book you read. And Colin wrote the most eloquent, sensitive, insightful essay about the Afghani women in Khalid Hosseini's book, A Thousand Splendid Suns. And I was so touched by how he dealt with a very difficult topic in such a sensitive and beautiful way. So, let's see. So we chatted through emails at first. You have this wall where you have to put an email in the system, and then the system sends it to the guy, and it goes through that way for your protection, so they don't know how to access you. But, so we emailed just about every day for like a week or two, and then all of a sudden he goes radio silent. Radio silent. And I had book club that week, and I told the girl, see, I was vindicated. See, all men are jerks, I told you. I got home that night, and he sent me an email saying that Hurricane Earl had blown the electricity out on the island, and that he went to a resort knowing that they have a generator to email me so that I wouldn't think exactly what I was thinking. Big points. He scored major points. Oh, let's see. Where am I? Okay. Oh, yeah. So finally, we graduated to Skype and to telephones, and we were chatting all the time, at least one time a day, at least hours. I mean, by the time we actually physically met, I knew the name of his dog growing up. I mean, we really felt like we knew each other so much better than if you had dated for 3 months, because you didn't have to worry about what you're wearing, what do you eat, that sort of stuff. It was just getting to know each other. And at that point, my mom was saying to me, because we were getting more and more involved, and she said, "Oh, Colin this, Colin that, you're acting like a stupid teenager." Da, 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 da. So when we finally met, and he met my mom, he was trying to impress her by speaking French to her, and you have to imagine this guy with a British accent who learned French in Quebec. So he's trying to impress my mom, and my mom says, Gia, tell him to stop it because he's giving me a headache. But then, after that, it was when Mom came into a room, or came into our house, she'd kiss him and like walk right past me. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm, stretch marks, that's me. Hello. So she wanted me to say something for her because she can't do the video thing. So I'm just going to read that. This is from my mom. Colin will always have a large spot in my heart. I was so proud to be his second mom and to have a British son. I will love him and miss him always and forever. Okay. So a little side note. That author, Khalid Hosseini, he had come on a book tour in his next book, and he was in Phoenix. So we went to see him and do the book signing. And Colin told him that he was responsible for us getting married. He instigated this whole thing. And so he signs the book. Oh, so glad I could help. Well, by marrying me, Colin took on a 13-year-old boy and 2 other boys in university. I mean, no sane man would do that. He never had children. He was living in paradise. And he comes to Arizona and takes this project on in this crazy household. No sane man would do that. It just goes to show that love truly is a form of insanity. And as my boys would tell you, he played such an amazing role in their lives in creating what they've become now as men, as a second father figure to them. I was going to tell you that my oldest son got married last October, and I always thought Colin was a natural father. When I could see him with my children, he was just natural at it. And when Christopher got married, we were talking about the prospect of becoming grandparents. And he was so excited that he would someday be a grandparent, and that the baby wouldn't know that he's a stepfather and that kind of stuff. It would just be, and that's one of the things that I regret that he will never live to see, because he would have been a fabulous grandfather. So Colin's kindness was the first thing I fell in love with. The second thing I fell in love with was his intelligence. And the third thing was that he was a die-hard romantic. And he took me out of my really self-defeating negative mindset and pulled me into a blissful marriage. Well, you all know the depth of my loss. And there are 3 things that give me some solace. One is that I know he didn't suffer. He didn't know what hit him. The second thing is that I know he died a happy man. We had already started planning to move to the coast to be closer to Seattle and the rest of the family. And we were planning on really retiring this time and just making art. Colin's a painter. He was in the middle of painting. It's over there. He didn't finish it. I'm going to frame it. Anyway, and I do glass, so we were going to go and do art and travel, and that would be it. So we were starting to dream about the next chapter, and now I will have to write it myself. The third thing that gives me solace is that he was able to save 3 lives by organ donation. He would be so happy about that. He would be so happy about that. The doctors at the hospital were amazed that a 70-year-old man can donate lungs and kidneys. And those of you who worked with Colin in the theater and stuff, you remember that he never went anywhere without his water bottle. Well, that goes to show, drink up, guys. Water. I will write to those 3 families who received Colin's organs, and I will tell them about the kind of man he was. And I'm hoping that they would write back to me and let me know about the lives that he's changed. He's changed so many lives, and those 3 are prominent among them. I never loved a man the way I loved Colin, and there will never be another Colin. I'll love him forever. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Gia. Yeah. That was excellent. Would anyone else in the room like to share at this point? Okay, come on. Yeah, go for it.
those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Jordan. I'm Gia's middle son. So Colin was my stepdad. I know my brothers wish that they could be here today too, but they're here in spirit, and I know that they sent some videos in, but you know, everybody in here knows how special of a guy Colin was, and to us especially. I owe so much to Colin. He really helped support our family and stepped up in so many ways. My older brother and I getting through college, you know, Colin and my mom helped move us into our first dorms, and Colin was with me when I got my first car, and you know, he would do anything for my mom. And as a new man around in my life, I thought it would be difficult to adjust at first, as you could imagine, but you know, as soon as you get to know Colin, you just can't not like the guy. You know, even my own dad had a hard time not liking the guy. And they even hung out together at times. So Colin's just that kind of person. And I don't even know where to start with stories. We just did so many things together. We played tennis in the neighborhood. We went to Big White skiing, and he just always had the brightest smile on his face no matter what, and always remained calm. I remember like 5 years ago, we were boating out on the Okanagan, and Colin was driving the boat, and it was a calm day, just normal sunny day. Then all of a sudden, we get caught with this wind vortex that got really, really choppy and big waves, and we're all on the boat just freaking out. And I just look up at Colin, who's captaining this thing, just calm as ever, smile on his face like nothing's going on. And I couldn't even keep him like calm and keep myself calm, so I don't know how he does it. And you know, one of my favorite memories with him, one-on-one, was skiing with him up at Big White. That was the favorite memory that I had of my own dad as a kid, skiing with him. So being able to relive that later as an adult with Colin in a different way was just so special. And I don't know if any of you guys have been in the car with Colin, but it could be scary at times. Especially going up to Big White, and I wanted to just drive so bad, but I didn't want to, like, you know, steal his thunder. He had to be the stepdad there in that situation. But still, you know, we really bonded that day, and we had a lot of laughs, and I'll just never forget that. And again, I owe so much to Colin, and we're never going to forget him, and we love him, and you know, we really appreciate you guys all being here to remember him with us. So thank you guys.
Come on up.
Why, thank you.
There you go.
Hide my notes behind that microphone. I'd like to read a poem by Linda Ellis, and it's called The Dash. It's one of my favorite poems, and I think that it's an appropriate time to hear this poem. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone as the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most was the dash between the years. For that dash represents all the time that he spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved him know what that small dash meant to them. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters most is how we've lived and loved and how we spend that dash. So think of this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. If we could slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to remember and understand the way other people feel, and to be less quick to anger and to show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might last only a little while. So when your eulogy's being read, with your life actions to rehash, will you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Thank you.
Let's go ahead and do one of the ones on video now.
Colin was a generous, fun-loving, and kind man.
He introduced us to the BVIs on 2 sailing trips, followed by several visits after he moved to Virgin Gorda.
Our daughter Leanne still proudly wears a t-shirt stating, "Made in the Virgin Islands." She's also proud to have been Colin's goddaughter and was thrilled when Najia asked her to be a bridesmaid at their wedding.
If anyone has tried playing Trivial Pursuit with Colin, you already know there was no beating him. I am sure we all wish he had been on Jeopardy just to see how far he would have gone.
We will all miss Colin for so many different reasons, but he will continue to live on through his generous organ donation and also through the wonderful stories we have to tell and the beautiful memories we will cherish. Sleep well, dear friend. Love,
Réjean
Brenda, Leanne,
and Jeremy.
Anyone else in the room want to share?
Hello. For those that don't know me, my name is Brittany. I go with him most days. But I first met Colin through Crossing Creek Community Theater. We were both in the opening play together, WCKY, and I had the privilege of meeting him and Najia. And I remember my first impression of he and Najia was just, man, how fun are they? Like, they're just doing this together. It was so sweet watching them go over their lines together. They would invite us into their home and run scenes together. And I mean, I think it's been said by many, if you met Colin and you were speaking to him, you felt like the only person in the world. He just made you matter. He immediately took you in. You were immediately important and worth being known, and he truly did want to know you. Like, he asked not just like, oh, how was the weather? He asked important personal questions because he truly wanted to know you. And I'm always going to have a really sweet spot in my heart for him, and you, Najee, I love you. So yeah, I just wanted to say that before I now read this tribute that his sister sent. His sister, Jean, was not able to be here today, and so I am going to stumble my way through reading all of these British and Scottish cities and read this tribute from his sister. Many of you will have only met Colin in the past few years, but as his little sister, I've known him all my life. Colin was born in Frimley Green in Surrey, while our father, an army officer, was attending military staff college nearby. I understand Mother's dog, Sally, was quite put out with this new arrival. A posting to Germany followed, and Colin apparently learnt German as well as English. I was born during this time and understand that when parents took Colin with them skiing and sledging in the Tyrol, it was Colin that I pined for, not them. Our next move was to Cyprus, where the weather was clement and old photos show Colin playing with small toys, sailing boats, and rock pools. We returned to UK at short notice due to political unrest and spent some time in Edinburgh before a longer period at the Sappers, Royal Engineers, base in Maidstone, Kent. Here we learned to ride bicycles and had a kite on which occasion escaped. The River Medway in Maidstone was prone to flooding, and Colin was terribly excited in being stranded on a double-decker bus on his way back from school. The army were brought in to rescue him and others. Very exciting. We moved from there to Surbiton, in good commuter distance for Father, who was based at the Ministry of Defense, our move coinciding with the Great Freeze in 1963. Our new home had burst pipes. While parents were busy sorting things out upstairs, Colin and I heard water pouring through the ceiling into the kitchen. On trying to tell our parents, we received the answer, "Leave us alone, we're busy." So Colin and I set into finding buckets, saucepans, and other things to catch the water. It was from here that Colin first went away to boarding school, Edinburgh House in New Milton, Hampshire, in the New Forest. We undertook the long journey to visit him on his days out and frequented the enchanted cottage tea room in Lyndhurst and also Colin's godmother, Gwen, who was a spinster with many godchildren and kept a wonderful box of toys to play with. One incident I recall when Colin was at school here was him swallowing a 3-penny bit, a 12-sided coin. As it didn't reappear, it meant an operation in hospital and a scar in his stomach, which stayed with him. He did enjoy the diet of ice cream, though. We later moved from Surbiton to a remote house south of Dorking on common land. The rented house was a strange Victorian property, reputedly owned by a countess who lived in Florida. Here we had generous neighbors and a big house with a swimming pool, which we were invited to use, and other neighbors who kept their somewhat disobedient donkey, Gingerbread, on the common. Among other things, there we played tennis as a family at a court at the nearby primary school. Other holidays at this time were trips to the cottage owned by Uncle Eric, known as Uncle Fish, in southwestern Ireland. The journey there was exciting as vehicles were hoisted onto the ferry on what looked like rope hammocks. From the cottage, we swam, rode ponies, and fished in the lake, eating our catch. Other holidays were in Scotland, which were combined with visits to Granny and other relatives in Edinburgh. In 1965, Colin moved school to Felsted in Essex, where Father had also attended, and I went to board at the East Anglican School for Girls in Bury, St. Edmunds, Suffolk. Well, during Colin's time at Felsted, activities included making a canoe, seeing a boat theme emerge. This also coincided with the purchase of Breckholm in Mundford, initially bought as a place we could spend half terms and exeats from school. Once there, we joined the Denver Sailing Club and bought an enterprise dinghy called Blow It. On Colin and Father's first trip out, they capsized and learned an important lesson: always take a change of clothes. This probably started Colin's love affair with sailing. In 1969, Father was posted to Bangkok for 2 years as a part of SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Colin and I visited for summer and Christmas holidays, which was great fun for teenagers. Here, too, we bought a boat, and sailing was in the sea near Pattaya, a popular weekend and holiday spot. After school, Colin went to Leicester University. He soon got involved in activities running the college bar and being captain of the university team, taking part in University Challenge. In the summer holidays, Colin spent time teaching sailing at summer camps in the USA. After camp, he took a Greyhound bus across the states, covering many thousands of miles. On graduating, Colin joined accountants Cooper and Librand, and having made the announcement that he did not wish to pay UK tax, he took his articles in Jersey and the Channel Islands. Here he had a good circle of friends, played hockey, and crewed on some larger sailing boats as opposed to dinghies. In 1977, Colin decided that having done the largest audit on the island, the Jersey Electricity Company, he would rather do some bigger accounts, and got a transfer to the Cooper's Montreal office, where he joined a new department titled Computer Audit Group. This was a very cosmopolitan setup of young people, leading to a good out-of-office social season. In his first winter, Colin and others rented a ski chalet, which they used most weekends. Colin later moved to Sterling Trust, still in Montreal, as internal audit manager. This meant that Colin had to visit all their branches spread across the Canadian provinces. Where possible, Colin would arrange for meetings on a Friday and then spend the weekend touring the city. Other travels found Colin and friends chartering boats around the Caribbean, but the BVI in particular. Colin then met Penny, his boss's secretary, and after a relatively short courtship, got engaged and married in August 1980. Colin moved with work to Toronto and lived about 30 minutes out of the city in Mississauga, from where he commuted by train. The house they bought backed onto a park from where was a 300-yard walk to the shore of Lake Ontario. Also, in the park were tennis courts, and the thud of a ball being hit could be heard from the house. At this time, Colin started out with an enterprise dinghy named Blewett. This was reputed to be the oldest enterprise in Canada. I visited one summer, and we sailed in Georgian Bay. Colin was happily at the helm, and leaning out when his toe strap broke, depositing him into the lake. And I had to rapidly take over at the helm and maneuver around to pick him up. It was August and the water was warm. Shortly after this, someone stepped into the boat and the floor gave way, meaning that the Blewett had to be scrapped. Colin then graduated to a 24-foot cruiser named Blewett Again, which he enjoyed taking on to the large expanse of Lake Ontario. Colin set up his own accountancy business with an assistant who originated from Hong Kong, and as a result, the business offered services in English, French, and Mandarin. Colin had a client, Burgundy International, with, as the name implies, international funds. After a while, they persuaded Colin to join Burgundy, and he enjoyed setting up funds based in Bermuda. After a disagreement on company strategy, Colin left Burgundy, although he remained on good terms. In 2001, Colin and Penny moved to Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands. This was an area they had gotten to know through sailing holidays. I gather there was quite a bit of red tape to go through before they could move and buy property, but all was sorted out in the end. Once on Virgin Gorda, Colin joined VISAR, Virgin Islands Search and Rescue, and was very active in fundraising for them. Here again, it was a cosmopolitan setup. Due to the tax-free status of the Virgin Islands, Colin did quite a lot of consultancy for a Swiss bank, traveling on the half-hour ferry to Road Town on Tortola, the main island. His qualification as a chartered accountant also enabled him to represent a number of companies as their resident director. Given the opportunity for sailing, Colin traded up to a 36-foot cruiser, Blewett Big Time, and this was quite often used by the Virgin Islands Search and Rescue for training. Colin was keen to get involved on the small island and helped coach youngsters in football and cricket. He also played tennis at one of the very plush resort hotels. The deal was that he and others had to be available on occasion to play with hotel guests. In return, they held an early morning session before the heat of the day on the weekends. After some years, Penny opted to leave Colin and eventually returned to Canada, where she had an early death. At this point, Colin found himself more free to travel. He still kept his boat, although it had serious engine trouble. The engine was taken out for repair at a boatyard, and Blewett Big Time moored out to sea. At this time, there was a great storm, and the boat was wrecked on rocks. Colin did manage to claim on insurance and was additionally able to sell the engine. At this point, he quoted a book entitled, "Where Are All the Clients' Yachts?" and where the best days of a boat owner's life were aptly described as the day you buy the boat and the day you sell the boat. Shortly after this, Colin was to meet Najia, and initially they had an online courtship, progressing to one commuting between British Virgin Islands and Phoenix, Arizona. Colin bought a house in Phoenix, and after their wedding, held on Virgin Gorda and moved to Phoenix, and Colin sold his BVI house, fortunately for him, shortly before a major hurricane swept through the island. Whilst I hand the story of Colin's life to Najia for more recent years, it is worth remembering that especially in the BVI, Colin did things at breakneck speed. His time was divided into a number of things that he had to do, which, given the remotedness, could quite often pose challenges. In Kelowna, I found that Colin had slowed the tempo of his life slightly, in part as he spent more time painting and walking Chester. That he was taken from us so suddenly will be a cause of grief for a long time, but we must remember all that he achieved during his life.
Let's go ahead and play another one of the videos.
Colin's passing was unexpected. It was really a shock to us, and we were all really heartbroken. I know this time is much difficult for Najia, but because they were very close, both of them, and they had a great relationship. But I know that Najia is surrounded by all her friends and family, and she'll take care of herself, and everything will go okay. When I think of Collins, I think of a very heartwarming and generous person. He's very cultivated. He's really a good person. He will be very much missed.
Anyone else in the room? to share? Okay, come on up, Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Somerville, and I know Colin and Najia from theater, and I think a lot of the people here were blessed to see Colin in these plays, but just in case you haven't, he played in the first show a very hapless kind of Keystone cop who was smitten with Najia, and he's played, among other things, a kind of a stoned hippie and a caveman and a cyclops. And darn if he didn't do all of that with incredible class and elegance. How did he manage that? But he did.
Thank you, Nancy. Let's go ahead and do another video.
Good morning to you all. I'm Ted Torres, and on behalf of my wife Donna, we would like to express our deepest sympathies to Najia, Arlette, Jean Walton, Christopher, Molly, Jordan, and Elliot at the sudden and unexpected loss of Colin this past month. We first got to meet Colin through Najia, and it was such a wonderful experience as Colin helped to complete Najia and brought her such wonderful happiness. We have so many wonderful memories and experiences that we shared together in a variety of dinners at each other's houses, sleepovers due to maybe one or too many adult beverages consumed on those evenings. And we had such wonderful and engaging conversation celebrating new holidays, such as Guy Fawkes Day, Robbie Burns Day, which was Colin's favorite as he got to break out the kilt, Boxing Day, and given Najia's French heritage, of course, Bastille Day. So many fond memories, and those are what we will take with us in remembrance of the wonderful person that Colin was. Colin was so giving and so caring, and never having been a father before, had suddenly been confronted in meeting Najia with the proposition of being a stepfather to three of the most wonderful young men that we know and love. This was the time period when we really got to engage and know Colin with the week-long festivities surrounding the marriage of Najia and Colin in Virgin Gorda. He arranged for all of us to stay at a wonderful compound right on the water with so many fun activities and memories, including a tennis tournament, shopping at the local market, which we found that on an island, you do not always get to select what you want, but you have to take what they have and manage on. Taking a sailing trip on a beautiful yacht, snorkeling in the Caribbean, and getting to know his sister Jean and her wonderful husband Clive, who became fast friends of ours as well. Because of Colin, Donna and I were introduced to some interesting new things. Haggis would be one of the most memorable. We didn't like it that much. And scotch, which to this day we are still not big scotch drinkers, but Colin educated us about the necessity of having a little dram, or a wee bit of dram, of water adding to cut the somewhat pungent, throat-burning consumption of this traditional Scottish beverage that we liken to jet fuel here in the States. Colin enjoyed life to the fullest. He was an avid sportsman, always had a thirst for knowledge, was well versed in such a wide variety of intriguing and interesting subject matter, and had an amazing recall of obscure facts and trivia. We wanted to see him on Jeopardy, as I'm sure he would have dethroned Ken Jennings as the all-time champ. We missed both he and Najia once they moved away from Phoenix and up to Canada, and alas, it was wonderful to see them both again, reconnect, chat about great times, and make new memories this past October at the wedding of Najia's eldest son and my mini-me, Christopher, to Molly in Palm Springs. Colin, we love you, we will miss you, so here, our friend, we would like to raise 2 glasses to you of this fine scotch add a wee bit dram of water, and toast to you and a wonderful life that was lived exceptionally. And as we say in Spain, do this with the water. As we say in Spain, Colin, salute, we love you. And as you say in Scotland, Slan Shavar. Salute, we love you.
Anyone else in the room want to share? Okay, come on up.
I didn't plan to come up here, but my name's Marie. I know Colin through the theater also. And a couple of things really stood out to me about Colin. One time while rehearsing in their beautiful home, he discovered my interest in genealogy, as is his. And he showed me the most remarkable, incredible artifacts from his own family. Right there, yes. That absolutely blew me away. The other thing that really struck me about Colin was his incredible kindness. We all come to rehearsals from everywhere and doing different things, and sometimes we're not always in the mood to rehearse. But Colin was always there with a huge smile on his face, greeting every person that came through the door, and not just a, "Oh, how are you?" It was a, "How are you?" Because he was really asking how you were. He was concerned, and he had that concern, and he shared it with everybody. To me, Colin's always going to be the hungover bachelor to this Alice Portnoy. And he's always going to be the love-struck policeman infatuated with the beautiful detective. We'll miss him.
Anyone else? Yeah, come on.
Good morning. My name is John Sloan, and I live kitty corner to Colin and Nadia on Vineyard View Drive. Colin and I, in fact, may be distantly related. If I remember correctly, his grandmother from Ayrshire, Scotland, was a Sloan. For many years, I thought the Sloans, without an E, were English and Protestant, and with an E, were Irish and Catholic. I was disabused of this by a fellow by the name of Gordon Sloan, who was the chairman of the UK pork renderers. He asked me where I was from, and I said Canada, and I told him that I thought Canadians with the name of Sloan without an E were Protestant, and with an E were Irish and Catholic. And he said, "Laddie, the Sloans aren't English, they're Scottish." And he told me about a small town by the name of Barr, B-A-R-R, a two-pub town, slightly south of Prestwick. And I had an occasion to go to Scotland, and I drove across the country and went to Barr. And I went to the graveyard in Barr. And in the graveyard, I found many John Sloans and David Sloans, both of which are family names. And I think my great-grandfather went from somewhere in Ayrshire, south of Prestwick, to Inniskillen, Ireland, and then on to Perth, Ontario. Now, Colin and I never had the opportunity to walk our way all the way through to see if, in fact, we were related or not. But it's one of my regrets. Last time I saw Colin was on Robbie Burns night, and in fact, I didn't mind the haggis at all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll finish this time with two other videos from your other two boys. So,
hi everybody. My name is Elliot. I am the youngest of Najia's sons. Just wanted to say thank you for everybody for making the time to come remember Colin and just appreciate the great person and man that he was. I'm still in quite disbelief over the whole thing. It just is unreal. Colin, to me, was someone that I thought was just going to live forever, and he's made a big impact on my life over the last 12 years, 13 years, however long it's been. And there's just no one else like Colin. The way that I always will remember him is just being just so positive and always having a smile on his face and just ready to take on the next challenge, no matter what it was, and just always having like a bright outlook on life and just kind of making things feel at ease. I remember being very stressed out about money or, moving to Santa Barbara and things like that, and big things in my life, and Colin was able to kind of simmer it down for me and kind of simplify it, if you will, and change my perspective on it and kind of just make me more comfortable with the whole situation. And Colin came into our family at a pretty crazy time, and coming from not having kids on his own to meeting my mom with 3 sons and a pretty hectic family, isn't easy to do. And Colin took it with pride, and he didn't question it and look back. And I would just always was just so surprised on how he was just able to handle that, and he was just graceful about it. And I was 13 or 12 or 13 around the time when I was introduced to Colin, and at the time I remember, my mom will remember too, and I know Colin does. I remember saying, I don't need another parent like a hole in the head, and I was just a stubborn, young teenager, and Colin didn't resist. Colin didn't overstep his boundaries. He didn't try to be my father, and respected me, but I was always surprised that he was able to put up with the trouble that I put him through. And on top of that, the way that I could tell he made my mom feel, she, it was like something was lifted from my mom and they were together, and you could just tell she was just happy, and she just was in a bliss with him. And Colin did whatever it took to make sure my mom was safe, happy, and protected, everything. And that was huge. So, Colin was able to take these things and bring them to the next level, and he took care of not only me, my mom, but the family, Mimi, the dogs too, my childhood dogs, Toby and Sophie's. He loved those dogs, he loved his dogs, he loves Chester, he's just an all-around, just filled with love, just a great man. And I remember him dropping me off, and when I was in high school, taking me to practice, dropping me off at school, and he would pick me up from practice before I was able to drive, and my teammates would be all waiting outside the court, and we would see him, drive down the parking lot, and he would have the biggest smile on his face driving down the parking lot. And that's all I see in my mind is just Colin's smiling face. And he will live on forever. There's just no one like him, and it's heavy, but he will live on forever. He already is, and I think everybody can agree that, Colin is a one-of-a-kind man, and just the biggest heart, biggest smile, and we all love Colin. We're all gonna miss you, and yeah, I love you guys all. Thank you for again for taking the time out and remembering my stepdad. Bye.
Hi, I'm Chris Karen, Nijia's oldest son. Just wanted to say a few words about Colin. He was a father figure to myself and my brothers, incredibly selfless and really always there for us, no matter the circumstances. We'll never forget him. I love him very much, and yeah, love you, Colin.
I think we heard some common themes through there of a man who cared about people, a man who loved people, a man who smiled a lot, a man who drove cars and boats. And Colin was a great guy. I believe the first time that I met Colin was at a cast party with the theater where Brittany had been in one of the productions, one of the first ones, and they were having the cast party over at their house. And I just remember Colin and Gia just being so hospitable and welcoming everyone into their home and giving us the opportunity to watch the production together in their theater down there. And so it was just a fun time. And from there, I went on. At one point, I was for some reason decided to be in one of the productions as well. And now you guys have mentioned Colin's excellent performance as the friar in Much Ado About Nothing, and that's where I got to know Colin well. I was the very naive, gullible, love-struck Claudio, and Colin was the very wise and cunning friar that stitched the whole thing together. So, but with him playing a priest, we had the opportunity for some conversations off stage where he wanted to compare notes with what I do for a living as a pastor here. And so we had some good conversations about that. Yeah, it was a very, very fun time. But with getting to know Colin, definitely can echo everything you guys have said about just what a loving and caring man that he was. And he definitely loved his family and definitely loved you, Nigia, very much. And so as I was thinking about what to say in the message today, one passage really came to mind from Scripture that I wanted to share with you that I think will be encouraging to you guys today. And this is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And I think this kind of describes Colin in a way. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. And I think Colin was a representative of that kind of love. I think he showed that love to many of us, and I think that's why we're in this room today, is because we experienced that from Colin. As I mentioned, Colin and I had some of those conversations off stage, and of course on spiritual matters, we landed in different places. We have some different views on things, but we could have those conversations with love and respect for each other. And so today, even when I was talking with Nigia about doing this, I'm like, hey, if I'm genuine and if I'm authentic in who I am, I'll share with people what I believe and what my hope is in. And she said, yeah, you should do that. And so I'm going to do that in just a moment. But before I get to more of that, I just want tell you another story that Nagia was sharing with me when we chatted. And apparently around the time of when Colin, the one time he was upset with you about not going to the hospital, while Nagia was in the hospital, he was on a hunt for the classic edition of Winnie the Pooh. And Colin had been looking for this book, and he finally found it while Nagia was in the hospital. And so apparently he was filling his time without her by book shopping. And then later on, Nagia said she was reading some of the book to him and got to this one story in particular and noticed that Colin was starting to cry. And she said, well, what's going on? And he said, I remember my mom reading me that story as a kid, and how much that meant to him, just that connection. And so I want to read that story to you today. I've never read Winnie the Pooh, and I don't think in any service before. And so I thought it'd be a little different, but I think it's very fitting for Colin. So join with me as I read this. One fine winter's day, when Piglet was brushing away the snow in front of his house, he happened to look up, and there was Winnie the Pooh. Pooh was walking around and round in a circle, thinking of something else, and when Piglet called to him, he just went on walking. Hello, said Piglet. What are you doing? Hunting, said Pooh. Hunting what? Tracking something, said Winnie the Pooh, very mysteriously. Tracking what? Said Piglet, coming closer. That's just what I asked myself. I asked myself, what? What do you think you'll answer? I shall have to wait until I catch up with it, said Winnie the Pooh. Now look there. He pointed to the ground in front of him. What do you see there? Tracks, said Piglet. Paw marks. He gave a little squeak of excitement. Ooh, Pooh, do you think it's a woozle? It may be, said Pooh. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. You never can tell with paw marks. Well, these few words, he went on tracking Piglet. And Piglet, after watching him for a minute or two, ran after him. Winnie the Pooh had come to a sudden stop and was bending over the tracks in a puzzled sort of way. What's the matter? Asked Piglet. It's a very funny thing, said Bear. But there seem to be two animals now. There's whatever it was has been joined by another whatever it is, and the two of them are now proceeding in company. Would you mind coming with me, Piglet, in case they turn out to be hostile animals? Well, Piglet scratched his ear in a nice sort of way and said that he had nothing to do until Friday and would be delighted to come in case it really was a woozle. You mean in case it really is two woozles, said Winnie the Pooh. And Piglet said that anyhow, he had nothing to do until Friday, so off they went together. And there was a small spiny of larch trees just here, and it seemed as if the two woozles, if that is what they were, had been going around this spiny. So round the spiny went Pooh and Piglet after them. And Piglet passing the time by telling Pooh what his grandfather Trespasser W had done to remove stiffness after tracking, and how his grandfather Trespasser W had suffered in his latter years from shortness of breath and other matters of interest. And Pooh wondered what a grandfather was like, and if perhaps this was two grandfathers they were after now, and if so, whether he would be allowed to take one home and keep it, and what Christopher Robin would say. And still the tracks went on in front of them. Well, suddenly Winnie the Pooh stopped and pointed excitedly in front of him and said, "Look!" "What?" said Piglet with a jump. And then to show that he hadn't been frightened, he jumped up and down once or twice more in an excited sort of way. "The tracks," said Pooh. "A third animal has joined the other two." "Pooh," cried Piglet, "do you think it's another woozle?" "No," said Pooh, "because it makes different marks. It is either two woozles and one, as it might be, a whizzle, or two, as it might be, whizzles, and one, if it so be, woozle. Let us continue to follow them." So they went on, feeling just a little anxious now, in case the three animals in front of them were of hostile intent. And Piglet wished very much that his grandfather T.W. were there instead of elsewhere. And Pooh thought how nice it would be if they met Christopher Robin suddenly, but quite accidentally, and only because he liked Christopher Robin so much. And then all of a sudden, Winnie the Pooh stopped again and licked the tip of his nose in a cooling manner, for he was feeling more hot and anxious than ever in his life before. There were 4 animals in front of them now. "Do you see, Piglet? Look at their tracks. 3, as it were, woozles, and 1, as it was, Whizzle. Another woozle has joined them." So it seemed to be. There were the tracks, crossing over each other here, getting muddled up and with each other there, but quite plainly, every now and then, the tracks of 4 sets of paws. "I think," said Piglet, when he had licked the tip of his nose too, and found that it brought very little comfort, "I think that I have just remembered something. I have just remembered something that I forgot to do yesterday and shan't be able to do tomorrow, so I suppose I really ought to go back and do it now." "We'll do it this afternoon, and I'll come with you," said Pooh. "Oh, it isn't the sort of thing you can do in the afternoon," said Piglet quickly. It's a very particular morning thing that has to be done in the morning, and if possible between the hours of, what would you say the time is?" "About 12, said Winnie the Pooh, looking at the sun. "Between, as I was saying, the hours of 12 and 12:05. "Oh, really, dear old Pooh, if you'll excuse me, what's that?" And Pooh looked up at the sky. And then, as he heard the whistle again, he looked up at the branches of a big oak tree. And there he saw a friend of his. "It's Christopher Robin," he said. "Ah, then you'll be all right," said Piglet. "You'll be quite safe with him. Goodbye." And he trotted off home as quickly as he could, very glad to be out of all danger again. Well, Christopher Robin came slowly down his tree. "Silly old bear," he said, "what were you doing? First you went around the spiny twice by yourself, and then Piglet ran after you and went around it again together, and then you were just going around a 4th time." Wait a moment," said Winnie the Pooh, holding up his paw. He sat down and thought in the most thoughtful way that he could. Then he fit his paw into one of the tracks. And he scratched his nose twice and stood up. "Yes," said Winnie the Pooh. "I see now," said Winnie the Pooh. "I have been foolish and deluded," he said. "And I am a bear of no brain at all." "You're the best bear in all the world," said Christopher Robin soothingly. "Am I?" said Pooh hopefully. And then he brightened up suddenly. "Anyhow," he said, "it's nearly luncheon time." So he went home for it. And I think if Colin was read that story as a child, we can all agree that he learned the moral of that story and that he was not a man who chased his own foot tracks and went around in a circle. He was a man that was driven. He was a man on a mission. He was a man who wanted to accomplish much through his life. He was not hesitant to let you know what he thought about things. He was not hesitant to hold back. A man who was forthright in coming. And so I want to be equally forthright in coming with you today and just sharing my views on things and what I believe and what my hope is in for after this life. And so I just want to tell you that well, before I get that, another little tidbit is Najia also shared with me that while Colin was in the hospital, while he was on life support waiting for organ donation, she would go in and read with him. And that story was, she was reading through the Winnie the Pooh book to him. And when she got to that story, once again, he started to get kind of agitated and his heart started to race. And you could tell that he could hear. That he could hear what was going on. And the nurses had to come in to sedate him so that he didn't mess something up with all of the machines and everything. And so when I heard that Colin had an aneurysm and had been there with his dog, I was very sad. Brittany and I both were very, very sad to hear it. But I reached out to Najia and said, "Hey, I hear he's in the hospital. Can he have visitors?" She said yes. And so we went up there as well to see him at that point. And I shared with him then what I'm about to share with you now. I don't know how much he could hear. I don't know how much he could identify with it. But I just say that to tell you I equally shared this with him in that setting as well. But I believe that as mankind, that we have sinned and that we have gone against God. I believe that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. I believe that Jesus came and he was a fully man, he was fully God. I believe that he lived a sinless life. I believe that he died on a cross paying the punishment for sin. I believe that he rose again from the dead 3 days later. And I believe that anyone calls on his name and places their faith in him and what he did on the cross will be made right with God through faith in him and what Jesus did. Jesus takes our place. He got what we deserve, and we get what he deserves. It's a great exchange. Romans 8:1 says it this way: "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." So if you believe in Jesus, you have faith in Jesus, then you have hope for the future. To be in Christ Jesus is honestly the best thing in the world. And so I want to invite you to have the hope that I have. I want to invite you to come to Jesus, to believe in him, and to be made clean before God. Ephesians 2:8-9 says it this way: "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves, as the gift of God, not as a result of works, so that no one may boast." As a Christian, we boast not in ourselves, but in Christ and what Christ has done for us. So I want to invite you to be able to boast in Christ. As it says in John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life." And so that is what my hope is in. And that's something where yes, there's different views and there's different perspectives, and we can have honest and open, respectful conversations around those things. But I just wanted to be genuine with you in sharing that. And I'm going to close by reading another passage of Scripture that brings me great comfort, and I hope it does for you as well. And I'll invite Brittany to come on up. She's going to lead us in a song after this. So, Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Brittany's now going to lead us in singing Amazing Grace, and we want to invite you to join us if you feel comfortable doing that. And so I'll turn it over to you now, Brittany.
If you would stand and join if you can or desire to sing along as we sing this beautiful hymn together. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will
bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home.
I think we have done a great job of honoring Colin today. Thank you all for being here. Some of the ladies have prepared some just refreshments for afterwards. We invite you to hang around, chat, tell more stories, tell more jokes, laugh together in Colin's honor, because that's what he would love. And please take a moment to look at the displays and those things that are around. But thank you for coming today. You're dismissed.